Hey friends, what is up? Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out my channel as always. For those of you who are new here, my name is Daniel from iosoundstudio.com, and my personal goal is to impact the world with music and to inspire and teach others to do the very same thing. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about how to write really great melodies. If you guys are anything like me, then I'm sure you also share the desire to put out really great music and to put out really impactful music. But the only way that that can be done is if you first master the songwriting process. Now, obviously, there's always going to be room to grow as a songwriter, but the better you get as a songwriter, the more impactful your songs are going to be ultimately in the end. Great songs are not just a matter of production or mixing or mastering or even arrangement per se, but it all really comes back down to the songwriting. If the song is great, then the production will be better and the mix will be better and the master ultimately will be more impactful. And so I've said this before and I'm going to say it again, the best way that you can put out impactful and emotion-provoking music is to really spend time on the songwriting and really craft something special. From there, then you can put out a great song. But if you have a mediocre song from the beginning, no amount of production, no amount of mixing or outboard gear or additional plugins will ever make the song great. That's just a simple fact. Any producer or session musician or mixing engineer or mastering engineer who is worth their salt will tell you the exact same thing. So to get into it, today we're going to be talking about how to write great melodies. Now there's actually a lot on this topic, so I'm going to go ahead and split it into two separate videos. Now before we talk about all those things that accompany great melodies, if you're new here, I highly encourage that you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss the second part of this video or other videos like it in the future. The very first thing that I would suggest getting into to write really great melodies is to start getting a basic understanding of music theory if you haven't already. I would encourage you to study things like scales and key signatures. I would also suggest that you look into intervals and learn all the different intervals. I would also suggest that you learn about chord progressions and how the chord progressions can function in a song and evoke certain emotions. Is it better to go from like a 2-4-6 or to like a 1-4-6 in order to create a more emotional response? It matters. All those things make a big difference in the end. I would also suggest learning about rhythms and time signatures. If you learn about all these things under the umbrella of music theory, ultimately your songwriting will be much better in the end than it is right now. And the great thing about music theory is that there's really no ceiling to what you can learn. Music theory is really a tool to help improve the knowledge that you have and to give you more tools to creatively express yourself. It's of course not the end all be all, and it should never replace creative freedom. But the more that you know, the better you can be a songwriter and the better songs you'll be able to craft. The second thing about writing a great melody is starting off with a strong motif. A motif is ultimately a melodic theme that's represented throughout a piece of music, and it also works as the foundation of a melody. So here are 3 really quick tips on how to write a compelling motif. First, keep it simple and keep it memorable. Second, use distinct rhythms or intervals. These things will really make a huge difference. And thirdly, ensure that it's versatile enough to be developed throughout the song, right? If the motif idea is too basic, it won't be compelling and it won't be strong in its repetition throughout the song. It'll be easily forgettable. It won't capture your audience. And so when you go to write a motif, make sure that you do it intentionally, make sure that it has a strong rhythm, make sure that you're using good intervals, and ultimately that it will stick into the brain of your listener. Number 3, when it comes to writing a good melody, develop your melody. Once you have that motif that we just talked about, you can then expand it into a full melody. My encouragement is to use repetition with slight variations throughout the song. If you haven't already seen it in my video on how to write catchy songs, I highly recommend that you go check that out. I covered a huge array of different topics, and I've given you a lot of practical examples of how to actually do these things, how to write motifs, how to write catchy melodies, and also how you see it all throughout pop music. So I would highly encourage that you go check that video out and then come back and finish the rest of this video. The second part of developing a good melody is to incorporate contrast by changing the direction or by changing the rhythm. For example, the contour of the song in verse 1 may be going up, right? You may be kind of going up in pitch at the end of your phrases, whereas in verse 2, you might be going down at the end of your phrases instead of going up. That'll create a contrast between verse 1 and verse 2, and it'll add more interest to this motif that you originally developed, and it'll create more interest in your melody. So that's just a quick songwriting tip from me to you. And the third part of developing your melody is to experience with sequence, which is means repeating a phrase at different pitch levels. So you may, for example, say a phrase lower, and then you might jump up a fifth and sing that same phrase again, or you might jump an octave and say the phrase again. And this can be expanded with different production techniques and different ideas like that. The fourth part of writing a great melody is to pay attention to the overall contour. Now, the contour of a melody refers to the overall shape of the melody. Is your contour going up? Is your contour going down? Is your contour curved, going up then down, or down then up, etc.? Now, I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but a good melody typically has a few things. One typically has a mix of adjacent notes and leaps, meaning non-adjacent notes. For example, if your song is in the key of C, to make it simple, your song will have a good mixture of adjacent notes, being C to D, for example, in the melody, C, D, E, maybe F, something like that, and non-adjacent notes, meaning that your melody could start on C and jump to E and jump to G, etc. So that's a long way of saying that you want your melody to have some sort of diversity. The next thing that a good melody typically has is a clear point of climax. When the listener is listening to your song, they should easily be able to determine which is the emotional high point of the song, whether that's in the verse, the chorus, or the bridge. And a good contour of your melody should have a good balance between ascending and descending movements. Think of some of your favorite songs, whether that's classical pieces like one of Bach's symphonies, or that's one of your favorite pop ballads. All of them have all of these different things. They have a mix of steps and leaps, or adjacent and non-adjacent notes. They have a clear high point or climax in the song, and they also have a balance between ascending and descending movements. Those three things are very essential in writing really good melodies. And the fifth and final thing that I'll be talking about for this video is that in order to write a great melody, you have to consider the harmony. Let me explain. Your melody really needs to work well with the underlying chord progression. If your melody is fighting against the underlying chord progression, then there's going to feel like there's unwanted tension in the song, and that can be really distracting for the listener, especially if that's something that you're not doing intentionally. If that's something that you're doing intentionally to create a tension that's moving the song towards some sort of climax or some sort of resolution, then that's a different story. But if that's just out of some sort of naivete, or you're just kind of newer to songwriting, then that's something that I would encourage you to work on. Here are a couple of very simple suggestions that I would encourage you to try in your songwriting to help kind of resolve this problem between the melody and the underlying chords. Firstly, use chord tones. Very simply, that means orient your melody around the actual notes that are used in the chord. So for example, if you're playing a C major chord, go ahead and revolve the notes of the melody that you're singing over top of the chord around C, E, and G. Pretty simple. And then if you move to an A minor, then change the notes accordingly in your melody. That will create a lot of harmony and a lot of cohesion between the melody and the underlying chords. Now, of course, this is just like a basic guide. You don't have to do that for every single song at all. And in fact, the more you get comfortable doing this, the more I would suggest that you actually expand out of that to create more interesting melodies. Which actually brings me to my second point of considering the harmony, which is to incorporate non-chord tones for more tension and more harmonic interest. Now, this has to be done strategically, and of course you have to have a level of expertise to do this successfully. But once you're comfortable using just the chord tones and revolving your melodies around chord tones, like I said, I would suggest using non-chord tones to make your melodies even more interesting. Now, third, when it comes to considering the harmony of the underlying chords as opposed to the overlaying melody, experiment with different harmonizations of the same melody. This is commonly referred to as reharmonizing a song. Here's a really good example that I would strongly encourage you to check out just to kind of get an idea of what reharmonization is if you don't know what that term means at all. It's pretty much taking a song and completely making different chord shapes underneath the melody that's already there. It gives the song a completely different flavor and just gives it a whole new artistic expression at large too. So friends, that wraps everything for this particular video. If you are interested in seeing part 2 to how to write great melodies, I highly encourage that you subscribe if you're not subscribed already, and make sure to share this video with a friend that is a songwriter that you think could benefit from this. If you guys want to check me out on other social media, of course you can check me out on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc. I'm a lot more active there than I am on YouTube typically, so I encourage you guys to check me out there, and I'll see you soon with a new video. Thanks so much. Peace out.